One of the reasons that I've brought you on this podcast is because I really admire your dedication to providing the best training to Frankie and Elsa. And I watch you pretty much every day on Instagram, teaching or refining skills for both your dogs. And actually, you really get it. You provide both your dogs with so much more than a comfy sofa and so much more than a walk around the block once a day. That is hugely, hugely important for any Labrador, but particularly working line Labradors. Welcome to the Tales of Success podcast, a show about Labradors and achieving training success. Hello and welcome to the Tales of Success podcast with me, Vikki Sharp. In this episode, I'm joined by a very proud and dedicated Labrador owner who's going to give us her take on living with Labradors and share some of her experiences. I'm sure that hearing from this experienced Labrador owner will give you great insight into what's actually involved with bringing up and training a Labrador. Let me introduce you to Amy, who is here to talk about her two beautiful Labradors. Amy, hello, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's start off by mentioning the very important ones first. Tell us a little bit about your Labradors. Let's go for their names and ages to start with.
So I've got Elsa, who is 7, well, she'll be 8 in May, and Frankie, who was 1 in January.
I bet that's a lot of fun, right? A 1-year-old and a 7-year-old?
Yes. I can't go from one dog to none. But we lost my older one a couple of years ago, and I thought, well, Elsa's getting to the age where I didn't want her too old before I got so she can cope with the puppy, but I wanted her old enough to be mature while I deal with the puppy. So it's working out all right at the moment.
Good, great stuff. Give us a little rundown of their personalities and also tell us where they are when they're at their happiest.
So Elsa is very laid back, very patient, although she's also a dog that doesn't like people she has her circle of trust, and once you're in, but if you're not, she's a bit wary of everybody, whereas Frankie will be everybody's best friend. Elsa's quite happy on the sofa or sunning herself or where there's food, and Frankie is probably happiest when she's running full speed or in water. I mean, when Elsa was prime, she was very much like Frankie, very full on, didn't listen as well. I made all my mistakes with Elsa and tried to fix them with Frankie, but yeah, she's slowed down a bit now. She's 7.
What age do you think she was when she slowed down?
Probably about 3.5, 4 when she started to. She also became gun shy about the same age, so that slowed her down when she's out. I think she started to slow down and then she became gun shy when she was younger. She didn't even notice the shots because she was too busy hunting and out and about. I mean, don't get me wrong, if a deer popped out now, she would still go. Still got it in her in the right mood.
So what's your history with dogs? So from a kid right till the present day, have you always had dogs in your life?
Well, I was annoyingly allergic to them when I was a kid. My gran had a Labrador that I was obsessed with, but I would swell up and asthma and, my eyes would swell, but I was always obsessed with dogs. So I would take the eye swellings to go and cuddle a dog. And then when I was about 15, I'd been in hospital for a while and they had dogs come into the children's hospital and I was always better on those days and things like that. So they said, well, if she's on the steroids, I think that masked my being allergic to them. And then since then we've always had Labradors and I've been fine with them, thankfully.
Labradors are your kind of go-to breed then?
Yeah, we've always had Labradors. They're just great, aren't they? They're just all-round family pets and intelligent and want to please and pretty easy to train if you know them. They've all been such different personalities. So Frankie's my 4th Labrador now. Although with Elsa, she started off as a family dog and then I'd do the training. And then my stepdad would walk her at the weekend and I'd say, are you making her heel? And I'd get her back on Monday and she'd be a nightmare. And then I watched him out the window once and he had it, do you know what I mean? She was pulling her head and I thought, for goodness sake, do you know what I mean? So at that point I went, right, that is it. I will do it all. And to be honest, I enjoy them. I enjoy the process and I don't mind not having a day off, to be honest, because I love them and I like going out with them. But it is, I can't blame anybody else now because it's solely me who's doing it.
Full responsibility for the good and the bad.
Yes.
And with Frankie and Elsa, are these lovely ladies purely pets for you or are they working dogs as well? Is there kind of a dual role that you have them for? Is it just a family pet?
So Elsa's just a family pet, but Frankie will hopefully work. Hopefully she'll be my first dog that works. Hopefully she'll pick up and be a gun dog. So as well as very much being a family pet when she's at home, but hopefully, she needs a job. Yeah. She's of that line. And with Elsa, I wasn't quite prepared for that work, didn't realise the difference between the working lines and the show lines when I first got Elsa. So I was thrown in the deep end then, have learnt a lot, made all the mistakes. So trying to, fix those with Frankie and hopefully, yeah, she'll work. She just loves it. She's so driven. She needs a job. She wants a job.
Yeah. So when you got both of them as pups, you've just alluded to the fact that you were a bit kind of shocked, I suppose, when you got Elsa about you've got a working line Labrador and how busy she needed to be.
Yeah.
Then when you got Frankie, was it a conscious effort to get another working line Labrador? And, why did you choose a working line lab rather than a show line lab?
I think I'm a glutton for punishment. And no, I wanted to have a dog that I worked. So I sought out working lines and the breeder I did because I wanted working lines and I wanted health tested and I wanted all of that. And, her parents work, her grandparents work. I met them all and they're just lovely temperaments, but have that drive. Whereas with Elsa, we just thought, we'll get another Labrador. And I wasn't ready, didn't realise the difference. Their hunt drive, their noses are incredible, which is nice for some things, like with the scent work and when I want her to use her nose, but then when she's sniffing out a deer and there's nothing in sight, not so much with Elsa. So it's definitely been a roller coaster, let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I think of late, I'm going to say particularly during the lockdown period where lots of people brought Labradors into their lives, I think we definitely saw that there was an influx of working line Labradors being brought into pet homes. And that's absolutely fine. They can adapt to that very well. People see they've got a working line Labrador almost as like a bit of a badge of honor. I've got a very intelligent dog. And you should be proud of that, definitely, when you've got a working line Labrador. But just tell people what that means to you. Would you consider having a working line Labrador and just kind of having them as that sort of sit on the sofa and have cuddles? Or do you feel that Frankie really does need to be doing other stuff as well?
No, she definitely needs to be doing stuff. I think you can have a working line Labrador and they don't have to be working as long as you mentally stimulate them enough. Training, whether it's scent work or it's even just the gun dog training, and don't intend to work them. Do you know what I mean? Just something to use their brain, agility, or some kind of mental stimulation rather than just going on a walk and then sitting on the sofa. I mean, don't get me wrong, Frankie loves to sit on the sofa and have a cuddle as well, but she definitely needs some kind of mental stimulation, really.
Yeah, I've always found that they kind of have this need to have a feeling of purpose.
Yeah.
That's what I say to people, you're working on Labrador will quite happily sit on the sofa for cuddles and enjoy all of that good stuff about family life, but they will have a desire for purpose. And that's where gun dog for fun, scent work, or even just training, everyday training really does tap into that natural desire to want to be doing stuff. So when Frankie came along into your life, you'd already gone through 6 or 7 years of training with Elsa and you'd experienced all of the fun, the excitement, and probably lots of frustration.
Oh, yeah.
So when Frankie came along, did you do things differently the second time around? And I guess, was it easier because you'd been through it already, or harder because you kind of knew what to expect?
Definitely did things differently, especially recall. I poisoned Elsa's recall so many times and didn't get it right and wasn't prepared for that hunt drive and red mist of hunting and all of that. So yeah, I definitely did things different with Frankie, especially her recall. I started that nearly from day dot and proofed it. I mean, for the first week, I blew the whistle and had a party of only liver cake. Didn't use liver cake for anything else because I was very guilty of devaluing treats with Elsa. So I'd give her a bit of kibble for sit and then I'd give her a bit of liver cake. So the recall reward didn't stay special. So with Frankie, I mean, for the first week, I basically blew the whistle and had a party of food for 20 seconds, 4 times a day, every day, just for the first week in the same room, and then room to room, then garden to room, and built it up so slowly and cemented it, and then built in distractions. I roped in my friend with her black Labrador to be a distraction, but then if Frankie didn't listen and went up to them, she would just be still and not play with her. And so really proofed it, which is what I didn't do with Elsa. And it's pretty, touch wood, it's pretty reliable because of that. I think it's not a quick process, it's a long, and even now sometimes I think, right, I need to just, she's getting into adolescent, just make sure I proof it and recall her back from nothing, so that she doesn't think that if I call her, it's always I'm calling her away from something. And her reward has changed. So I used to use the liver cake and she loved it, and I'd throw a load of it on the floor, snuffle, 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 find it. And now food outside doesn't really cut it for Frankie anymore. She's sort of grown out of that. So a normal tennis ball doesn't cut it either. So it's a rabbit fur ball is or the ability to free run. So she comes back, she gets the rabbit ball, and then I can release her to go run again. Those are her biggest rewards.
That's quite interesting what you say about recall. So I just want to touch upon that point. You said that you essentially blew your whistle and had a party of food with her 4 times a day.
Yeah.
And that's really important, because if we think about how we use recall for most dogs, it can turn out to be quite a negative thing in their mind.
Yeah.
Because we always call them back when they're about to get put on the lead and the fun's about to end.
Mm-hmm.
We call them back when we're about to put them in the car. We call them back when the walk has come to a conclusion. We call them back when we're going home, or we call them back to take something out their mouth, or to even tell them off because they've done something that they shouldn't. So all of those reasons are pretty rubbish in a dog's mind.
Absolutely.
Whereas every day, if you can have a party with your dog, every time they come back for no reason, you are seriously stacking the odds in your favour of it happening more frequently. And that's so important.
Being consistent with it, I think, as well, and not rushing the process. So until I proofed it enough, I didn't use the whistle out, because if I hadn't proofed it, if I've proofed it in my house and my garden, those distractions aren't anywhere near being out, and there's birds and there's pheasants and there's other dogs and there's smells to call her away from. So I really made sure I took the steps slowly. It was a long process, but it does pay off if you're consistent and you do it. And also, a lot of the time, if you are calling them away from another dog or something fun, you've got to be more fun than what you're calling them away from, because otherwise, what, in their opinion, why are they going? I think one of the most important things to try and get a handle on, but also one of the hardest if you're not consistent and you don't break it down enough.
Yeah, I think you've got to put yourself in your dog's mind as well. You've got to think, what is this all about for my dog? What are they getting from it, either by listening to me or not listening to me? So think dog is kind of what I always try and say to people.
Definitely.
Really get in your dog's mind. So when second dog came along and you've done this training for the first year, have you found it easier than the first time around? Or I suppose another way of putting that is, have you made more comparisons? You might have found it more difficult because you're comparing one dog to the other.
Yeah, I think I definitely have been more aware of where I went wrong with Elsa, especially her recall and stuff, and tried to fix that in Frankie. Frankie's very driven, needs a job. She learns so quickly. So I'm very aware that she will also learn the wrong things just as quickly. So I've probably put that pressure on myself to try and get everything right. And then I've probably focused on the things that I wanted, like the recall big time with Elsa, that then I haven't focused on the art of sort of doing nothing as much with Frankie. And she struggled with that. So sitting out in the environment and just sitting down and doing nothing, that's been her sort of area that she struggled with. Her recall's been so much better because I focused so much on that then I didn't focus so much on doing nothing, whereas Elsa's the queen of settle. It's adapting what you've learned, but also their different personalities and their different strengths. So it's all a learning game the whole way through.
And you said about them having different personalities, and that again is really key with training. The vast majority of the training that we do is done on a one-to-one basis, and that's because we always say to our clients that every dog is different, but also the humans are different. You have a different relationship. You want different things from your dogs, and just doing generic training from a book won't always necessarily work for your particular dog. So I guess you've done things differently for both dogs, right? Because you understand that they are different characters.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, Elsa is so food driven. If I threw a ball for Elsa in the park, if there was no distraction, she'd go, all right, yeah, I'll chase it. But if I'm in the field, she couldn't care less about a ball. Whereas the fur ball to Frankie is like, yes, that's her sort of biggest reward. And she doesn't want food. The amount of times if she does something and I try to reward her with food out, she doesn't even take it. Or she'll check in and I'll lob her a bit of food to reward it. She attempts to catch it, doesn't, throws it's on the floor and off she goes. She's not fussed about it. So Elsa's picking up all the bits that Frankie drops. So yeah, it's definitely finding what ticks with that dog. I suppose people assume all Labradors would like a ball, or they're all really food driven, which at certain times mine are, but at certain times they're not. Like I said, I mean, Frankie with the recall loved the liver cake for a long time, and now is like, nah, wouldn't be bothered about that. So also as she's grown up, her reward system and what is high value to her has also changed. So I've had to adapt that as well.
And that's ever evolving throughout their whole lives. You know, you get these troughs of good stuff and not quite so good stuff, and that will always change. What would you say the best bit about having a Labrador in your life? What makes you get up every morning and smile when you see your dogs?
Just their little personalities and their company, and they're just so happy to see you all the time and loving, and just having them around, just them being there, I think.
I'm biased, but yeah, Labradors are perfect. They are worth getting up for every single morning. One of the reasons that I've brought you on this podcast is because I really admire your dedication to providing the best training to Frankie and Elsa. And I watch you pretty much every day on Instagram, teaching or refining skills for both your dogs. And actually, you really get it. You provide both your dogs with so much more than a comfy sofa and so much more than a walk around the block once a day. That is hugely, hugely important for any Labrador, but particularly working line Labradors. So for those listeners that are in doubt about the amount of training you do or why you do it or even how you do it, just tell us a little bit about what your daily routine looks like as far as training. So daily and weekly, what do you do with your girls to keep them happy and well trained?
So Frankie has gun dog training classes that she attends, but then also throughout the week I'm doing the homework. I sometimes meet up with my friend, with Millie, the Black Labrador that you've probably seen numerous times in our videos, to help train and set things up so that I'm not just training her all the time. She has to train with other people around. I also give her off days of formal sort of gun dog training to just sort of go on a walk and get to be a dog as well. I think it's important to have that downtime. At the same time, when I say she has downtime, she's still expected to recall, she's still expected to check in, she's still expected to heel, which is very much work in progress, but we're trying. And cue discrimination, so make sure she's listening, which is with my apples, oranges, waiting for the word before she gets her favourite word free. So even on their down days, where they're not in formal training, I suppose I am training them all the time. Do you know what I mean? But weight, I think, is really important to get out the car. They're not allowed out the car until I say. They're not allowed to eat their food until I say. Do you know what I mean? Even those are just sort of daily things. I put the food down and they wait until their names are said, which I don't even sort of think of training, but it's just constantly cementing those little habits.
I think with the way you do that's really important, because some people see training as something that happens once a day or once a week or even once a month. It's an event. But the issue with having training as an event is your dog can do it for that 20 minutes you're doing training, but then the next day and the day after and the day after, if they don't get an opportunity to practice it, it doesn't become an ingrained habit and a behavior. And that's really what you're doing, isn't it? You know, even when they get a day off from training, they're still practicing all the good stuff that they need to do until it becomes that habit and the behavior for them. Could you imagine if you did the training and then just left them to it?
I would look like I did it with Elsa at one point, where I would have my lead around my neck and my whistle and I wouldn't see it, and I would look like I didn't have a dog. So I've been there, made that mistake. As much as they are allowed to go off and explore, as long as I work on them checking in and recalling when need to and healing when need to and waiting at gates and all of those sort of things, so they're not completely left to their own devices to just do what they want. Because Frankie's slightly in adolescence now, and she's been slightly pushing the boundaries. As like her, I mean, she can clear a field in 30 seconds. She's quick. So she's pushing that sort of circle of perimeter around me to self-hunt. So the other day I found myself, I was out walking with my friend and I probably wasn't paying as much attention to her as I should have been. And I suddenly thought, God, I need to, do you know what I mean, go back to going, no, that's too far. That's where you need to come. You know, you're allowed up to there, and then you need to check back in with me and come back. And the second I started paying more attention to her, she turned back on. So it was very interesting that the second she thought, well, mum's not paying attention, she's talking to her friend and I'll just go and do what I want, compared to when I was like, no, I am paying attention. You know, you do need to check in more and listen. From a safety point of view, she did turn back on. But also I think training is, a lot of people think training is formal and it's, you know, just obedience. It helps create such a bond between you and the dog as well. And I think people sort of don't necessarily see it as that sometimes. I love training them. I love the bond it gives us. I love watching them learn. It fascinates me. And then I think there's such a sense of achievement when you get to that goal or you accomplish something and you've done it together as part of a little team. I think it's really rewarding in itself.
It could sometimes seem like it takes us forever to get to that goal as well. And some people lose the will to carry on at some point because they think, it's not working.
Yeah.
It's taking far too long. The dog doesn't get it. I'm not doing it properly. But it can be a real slow process. And
Oh yeah.
I know with Frankie, she's really good at some things, and other things you work with her every day to
Yes.
encourage her, because she's always learning.
Yeah.
Do you have these little goals that you set yourself of saying, right, we're going to master this skill? We've given ourselves a certain amount of time. Do you have even like a written chart of things that you're working on, or is it just something in your mind that you want to achieve? And what would you say to people that are considering giving up on a certain skill?
Definitely when she was younger, I used to have like a bit of a diary, and I'd have the things that I was working on, and try and do a bit of each of them, or alternate them every other day or something. But it does take time, and with like settling with Frankie in the environment, that's really hard for her. She just wants to go 100 miles an hour all the time. So that's something I probably, to be honest, even need to do even more than I do. So I try to always have like a drink break in the walk, and just sit for 5 minutes and not do anything. But I think I need to do it in even more in even more environments, because that's something that she struggles with. Yeah, it takes time. I mean, she didn't like the car so much. She wasn't, and that mine are going to be in the car a lot. So every morning for 3 weeks, I fed her breakfast in the car. I was out there every morning, rain or shine, putting her breakfast in the car, so that it became a fun place. And sometimes it's a slow process, and sometimes you feel like you're not getting anywhere. I mean, there'll be some days that if she's really frustrated, she can't settle for that long, or she'd be jumping up at me. She'd be like a kangaroo. Whereas now we've worked on it a lot more, and she's getting better. But it's not a quick fix. Yeah, I mean, some days you can pull your hair out or feel like it's just what is the point of not getting anywhere, but you will get there eventually.
Yeah, and you said it's not a quick fix, and you're absolutely right. Nothing in dog training is a quick fix, because our dogs have got their own mind.
Yeah.
They've got their own way of wanting to do things, and it's our job to kind of guide them in the right direction. I think it's made even worse for new dog owners that they watch YouTube, they look at Facebook, they watch the TV, and they see all these dog trainers fixing a problem that's existed for years, and they do it in 5 minutes flat. And actually, that's just clever editing.
Yeah.
So, you've kind of said that these things take a lot of time, and I totally sign up to that. It's a slow process.
Yeah.
But as long as you're making bits of progress every day, you'll eventually get to that end goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some days there'll be something that happens and you feel like you've taken 10 steps back, but the foundation will be there. So if you just keep still building on it, it will get better.
Absolutely. And for someone that owns 2 dogs, so we've got a 7-year-old and a 1-year-old, both working lines, but living in sort of a more pet environment, a family dogs, and one that wants to go on and work. What would your top skills be? What's most important in your mind?
Recall, 100% recall.
If you can't get your dog back to you, it's kind of pointless teaching them anything else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so important, I think, from a safety point of view, from a courteous dog owner point of view. There might be a reactive dog, and I want to be able to get mine away from it and not cause that dog any stress. So many different things, and that's not an easy thing to do if your dog is loves other dogs. I would say that's most important, my number one. I had big struggles with Elsa so I've been there, I've pulled my hair out, I've thought, what is the point? I've felt like I've tried everything. I've had to strip it straight back, and come up with a different whistle combination and start from day one again. So I've been there. It's not easy.
As humans, we probably make a bit of a rod for our own back with our Labradors, because from a young age, we try and keep them entertained. We try and keep them busy. We give them lots of stuff to do, lots of excitement, lots of really nice walks, swimming, playing with other dogs.
Yeah.
And then they get to 8 months old, and we start tearing our hair out because the dog always wants to go up to other people. The dog always wants to be on the go. And actually, for the most part, we as the humans have conditioned them to do that. We've encouraged them from a young age. So it's doubly difficult for an adolescent dog to do nothing, because they've never been used to it. So what would you recommend to people about keeping their dog calm and doing nothing? Has it worked for you simply just kind of going and sitting on a park bench and trying to keep them nice and calm while they just watch the world go by? Or do you go for a different method just to let her know that she doesn't always have to be on the go?
On a walk, we'll just sit somewhere for 5 minutes, or I stand somewhere for 5 minutes and she's on the lead, and I used to have to sort of scatter food on the floor to even keep her interested and not jumping up at me. And she's getting there. The more we do it, the more she I mean, she's never at the point where she's switched off and she's going to have a little nap no matter where we are, or she's so on alert all the time. But she is getting better at sitting and like you said, going to a park bench and just sitting for 5 minutes anywhere and everywhere. Really, it's such an important skill, which I probably should have done more of with Frankie when she was little. But there's always something to work on, so that's one of our things.
Absolutely. You can never do enough of everything. There's not enough hours in the day to do enough of everything. It's and like you say, every dog, you said this earlier, every dog's different. So what you would assume would have worked might have been totally different once you get to know Frankie's personality, and you know that she's a bit of a busy bean, and she's a bit of a live wire, always wanting to be on the go. So when you're doing this training, in fact any training, is there a particular kind of training regime that you subscribe to, that you follow? So there's examples like we have positive reward-based training, we have balance training, we have aversive methods, and a whole combination of loads of different things. Do you adapt your training for each dog and each situation, or are you very rigid of I'm only going to do one certain thing?
No, I think I adapt. Like I said, it's positive, food-based, play-based. Frankie will play with a tug toy. Elsa was never bothered. Do you know what I mean? So Elsa's more food reward based is her thing. Frankie is more sort of play with the ball, play with her. So I think you definitely have to adapt it to each dog. Like I said, Frankie won't take food when she's too focused and wants to do it. So I can't use that method with her because it's just blanks it. So yeah, definitely reward based, play based, food based. I think dogs also need boundaries. And if they're never sort of told, not that I tell her no, but if they don't know the boundaries, I think sometimes they struggle with life.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I can relate this to me being a child, right? So when I was a kid, I know for a fact I was a bit of a pain to my parents at times.
Yeah.
And they would have sat me down and probably explained to me that I was being a brat and I needed to change my behaviour. Probably done it in a very nice way. And then I carried on being a brat. They put me on the naughty step. I spent a lot of time on the naughty step. And then if I was still being a brat, I'd probably get put in my bedroom to calm down for half an hour. And that helped me learn kind of what behaviour was not acceptable.
Absolutely.
And as I got older, I stopped being a brat because I realised that actually I didn't want to go and sit on the naughty step.
No.
And I didn't want to go in my bedroom for half an hour. So I learned that actually being good was better. And when I was good, amazing stuff happened.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how we need to look at dog training as well.
Absolutely.
So dogs do need to know boundaries, absolutely. And we talk about consequences. And as soon as I mention the word consequences to a dog owner, they think it means hitting their dog, yanking on the lead.
No.
Absolutely not. A consequence is just something that makes your dog sit up and go, oh, I'm not sure about that. It's relative to me sitting on a naughty step. It could be taking a toy away from them. It could be withdrawing all the attention from them just for 30 seconds. It might be putting them in a different room to have a timeout so they chill out and calm down.
Yes, that's what if Frankie has got the devil in her and she's annoying Elsa, I just remove her for the room. It only takes sometimes 30 seconds. And then he's like, oh. And sometimes I think they get a bit like an overtired toddler if they're too stimulated and they just need to. Sometimes when she doesn't have a crate anymore, but sometimes when she had the crate, I'd just stick her in the crate and then she'd go, oh, and then have a nap. But if I had her in there, she would have just carried on and carried on and carried on. So it's like you said,
little dogs do not have an off switch. So occasionally we need to step in and kind of push that off switch for them to encourage them. And it does help your dog learn the boundaries of what's good and what's bad. And I spoke about my parents would have sat me down and explained to me what wasn't good behavior. We don't have the luxury of doing that with our dogs because they don't actually speak our language. We can't sit them down and explain it. We have to show them, but actually it's never about hurting our dog. It's not about violence or anything like that. It's just taking some of the good stuff away occasionally, just so they sit up and go, oh, that's a bit rubbish. Would you say that the reality of owning Labradors is different from how you perceived it might be when you first brought Elsa home?
Yeah, the working line absolutely is very different to what I perceived. I didn't realise the big differences they can have between the show and the working line, and her hunt drive is just something else. I mean, we'd be in a field, you couldn't see anything, and she'd pick up the scent of a deer from 30 minutes ago and she was just nose down. So I definitely wasn't prepared for that. They're very sort of, as much as they're very much with me in the house, when they're outside, they're very independent thinkers. I like that they're independent. I like that they think for themselves and they're driven. And Frankie's not really, she knows her own mind. So if we're out with friends and she won't necessarily going to follow them. She does what she wants to do, and I like that. But then she's very, very clever, too clever for her own good sometimes, and test me. But then also I like the journey. I like that it's challenging. I like that when then we achieve something, it feels more rewarding. I just like the process, even the bad bits. Frustrated, but
do you ever see that process coming to an end of training? So we've got Elsa as 7 years old. Do you feel that she's ever going to get to the age where that training will come to an end and you don't have to dedicate as much time? Or do you see that actually this is like a lifelong commitment to her, that you're going to carry on educating, training and guiding? Where do you sit with that?
I think going to be, I think it gets easier when they get older slightly, but I think it's still a training process. I tend to do more the scent training with Elsa. She loves sniffing, using her nose, absolutely loves the scent training. And there's so many little bits to work on in that, like her indication and her confidence in certain bits, and searching for your scent over distracting farm smells, and she can do that till she's old and grey, do you know what I mean? Which is why I kind of do that more with her, and more the gun dog stuff with Frankie now when she's young. But I think I think they always want to do stuff with you, no matter how old they get. They want that sort of bond and to do the training elements with you, because they enjoy it a lot of the time. I think.
I agree with that. My eldest boy is 15 years old tomorrow, actually.
Oh, wow.
Although we're not actively training with him because he's too old and he sleeps most of the day, he still learns. He still likes that interaction. So we still do bits of it. And that's just because we want to give him the enjoyment that he gets from it all. So it is really important. At the start of this, you told me what the best bits about owning a Labrador were. You said those individual characters and just waking up to them every morning were pretty good. What would you say, in all honesty, is the most frustrating part about sharing your life with Labradors?
I think partly it's, especially with Elsa, it's everybody's opinion that because they're Labradors, they're super, super friendly. They want you in their face. They want you to, rough their head, and everybody's dog is allowed to come over because it's a Labrador. It should want to play with everybody. And Elsa really doesn't. She's been sat in the pub and she's been led there like an angel, and someone's randomly come up behind me and just gone to stroke her, and she's freaked and then barked in their face. And it's just that, she looked like the Labrador that everybody wants to give the tummy tickles and they'll be with everybody. And she's really not. So I think that's frustrating.
I think there's that misunderstanding, really, that most people that don't have Labradors have this picture in their mind that all Labradors are slightly overweight, they're a bit slow, they plod behind their owners, and they're very docile. That's not actually that accurate, is it?
I can't tell you the amount of times I have been asked what mine are. What is Frankie? What is she mixed with? What is Elsa? Someone asked me if Elsa was a Ridgeback puppy. If she's a Vizsla, she must be some kind of cross. And I'm like, no, they're just not fat.
And that's it. We sometimes feel that we're up against it with large breed dogs that are very energetic and need that kind of purpose and that job to do. Because actually, as Labrador owners, we've probably got more dedication that we need to put into it. We need to do more training than a Jack Russell, for instance, because a little Jack Russell can jump up at people, it can bark, it can do all these kind of undesirable behaviours, and actually no one batters an eyelid because they're quite small.
Absolutely.
But when you've got a 35 kilo dog doing the same behaviours, it doesn't mean they're untrained, but actually people take a step back and go, why is your Labrador not trained? Get them under control. Do you feel that you have a bit more pressure on your shoulders having large breed dogs?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the little dogs are allowed to jump up and no one bats an eyelid. But if mine jumped up and got mud all over the top half of you, then it's like, whoa. Also, I think people seem to think that Labradors come half trained. So why aren't they half trained? And they really don't. Yeah, it's definitely that pressure of, you've got a Labrador, it should come half trained, it should be trained. Why isn't it if it doesn't do something? especially jumping up. I think that's a big one, and dragging people on the lead, because at 30 kilos, if they want to pull you over, they absolutely could. So there's definitely that pressure, I think, to have them more trained because they're a bigger dog.
So with that in mind, if you could give one or even two bits of advice to a new Labrador owner, so someone that's just got a puppy or is thinking about getting a puppy, what would that bit of advice be, your key piece of info or piece of advice?
Be consistent from day one. Don't allow the puppies, because they're cute and they're little, to do things that you wouldn't find acceptable when they're 6 months to a year fully grown, like jumping up at you when they're little, or they're jumping up at the side and you think, oh, isn't that cute, because they're tiny and they can't grab what's on the surface. But then when they're 6 months, they're going to do it, and you haven't, you've allowed it. And I exchange everything. So I did a lot of exchanging of I had treats in every pocket. I had tubs of treats in every room. So if Frankie got something she wasn't allowed, I exchanged it for food. So it didn't become a game of chase me around and try and grab it, especially because Labradors like to eat things that they probably shouldn't do sometimes. So it's, if she's not going to run away from me and swallow it before I've got it.
Yeah, you said about don't let them do things in an early stage which you wouldn't want them to do as an adult. Really, really key bit of advice, that, because Labradors suddenly go from a little puppy to a massive dog almost overnight. It feels like it's just happened. And Labradors will learn whatever we allow them to practice. So
Absolutely.
If we have a little puppy that we allow to jump up, or that we allow to pull on the lead, because actually it's not a huge problem for us.
Yeah.
When we do wake up one morning and they've doubled in size almost overnight, it becomes a problem. And it's not necessarily our dogs that are doing anything wrong. They're just behaving the way that they always have done, and it didn't necessarily bother us. So if you have got a little puppy, think about what you want them to do in a year's time and really enforce that from day dot, would you say?
My next puppy, I will not allow to, even when you go on your first walk and you've got your puppy and they pull ahead and you're like, oh, it's their first walk. But they very quickly, within a couple of walks, learn that they pull on the lead, they get to go where they want. So even from day dot, they learn that very quickly.
Yeah, we bring very intelligent breeds into our lives with Labradors. Yeah. They're way smarter than some people give them credit.
Oh, yes.
They pick it up from day one.
Absolutely.
So if we've got any Labrador owners there that have recently brought a puppy into their life and they're experiencing all these difficult things that we go through, puppy nipping, biting, dog not doing what we want them to do, destroying the house, what would your message be to any listeners that are just finding it a little bit challenging right now? Have you got any advice for them?
I used to find that a little bit of training and mentally tiring them out. I mean, we're talking 5-minute session when they're tiny. A little bit of training, use their brain, would really help tire Frankie out. I used to scatter her food all in the garden, so she had to sniff to find it. Big help, because, I mean, you're feeding them 3-4 times a day. 10 minutes of sniffing out in the garden and finding their food, or in the house. Again, the sniffing is calming, help them use their brain, tire them out. Giving them things to chew. So I let Frankie chew up all the recycling, because then I just lob it away. So she didn't really chew anything else that she shouldn't have had, other than my garden shoes, antlers, chew toys, giving them an outlet for stuff that they need to explore with their mouths and chew and things like that.
For me, it's about know where you want them to go and just be really consistent with that journey to get them to that point. And there's also loads of help out there for people. Yeah. But sometimes people can try too much to resolve a problem, because we have this world where Google, Facebook, YouTube is there. And often I hear, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried something else. Yeah. Did you find that trying too much was a bit counterproductive? Did you kind of pick your way and stick with it?
Yeah, I think because there's definitely, like you said, loads of different methods of doing different things. And if you chop and change between them, then you're not consistent with what you're telling the puppy. Also, they don't know how they're meant to behave. I saw one training YouTube thing that, you can't teach a puppy no. That no doesn't really look like, it's not a command, it doesn't really look like anything. So I used to have treats, and when Frankie sat at my feet and didn't jump at me, I fed it. Like, yes, that's the behavior I like, that's what I want, because they don't know what's right. They don't know what's wrong. So rather than just going no, no, no all the time, I consistently fed her for sitting, I fed her when I put the blender on so that the noise was all right, and now she comes running when the blender's on. So I overdid some things. But yeah, consistency is definitely key, because if you tell them one thing one way for a few days and then you switch up your method because you've watched something different and try it a different way, that it's harder for them to understand that that's the same behavior.
They probably sit there and think, why doesn't this human get some training for themselves? Because they don't know what they're doing.
It's always the handler, it's always the owner. We need training just as much, if not more.
Absolutely, totally agree with that. Amy, where can our listeners follow you and find out a little bit more about Frankie and Elsa? Where's the best place for them to catch up with you and see what you do with your guys or your girls?
They have an Instagram account at frankie.elsa.adventures, where I put up mostly stories of our daily walks and what the guys are getting up to, really. I tried to put some of the times that I'm frustrated or it's not necessarily going to plan, but
yeah. And that's why I really love watching these two on Instagram, because it's reality, it's real life stuff that you're putting on there. Amy, thank you so much for sharing your insights into training and caring for Frankie and Elsa. And from me, just keep doing whatever it is that you're doing, because these two ladies are absolutely living their best life with you. They appear to be very happy and content little Labradors.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
No problem. So for our listeners, if you have enjoyed this episode and you've enjoyed listening to Amy, please remember to subscribe and leave us a little review so that this podcast can benefit even more Labrador families around the world. Thanks for joining us. We hope that has been useful to you. But from me, all I want to finish off by saying is be caring, be consistent, and be your Labrador's best teacher. I'll catch you on the next episode.